Hi friends, welcome to the course of APM. I'm Pavan here on behalf of ITeLearn to drive you through the course of a well-renowned mobile test automation framework, which is known as APM. So currently, for this course, uh, like a bit of knowledge of selenium would be beneficial. However, if it is not so the case, then not an issue. It will be once we go through the course, I will compare few things about selenium and APM which are similar, and if you are very well versed with selenium, then it is very easy for you to grasp the things. However, considering you don't have a knowledge of selenium is how I will drive this course. And in this course, mostly I will cover on the Android platform. Okay. So in this course, basically I will cover the why mobile automation and how its significance in any test, uh, in any testing process when one is developing the mobile applications. So I will also cover about how APM wins the deal over different test automation frameworks available in the market, and its architecture also I will cover it going further later to it. uh, then I will explain how to install and configure it, and what are the different prerequisite softwares that you should be having to make it running up and to make it up and running. Thereafter, once the APM is up and running, you need an infrastructure where your test automation should be running. And for that, either you will be running the tests on the uh, on the real mobile devices or on the virtual devices. So there are some few softwares using which you can uh, drive your test automation on virtual devices. Also, the same tests you can run on the real devices based on the uh, different softwares that you need to install on the devices, on the real devices, I mean. So both the scenarios I will cover in the infrastructure setup part, and how using APM framework you have to write the scripts so that you can locate different elements and drive the actions on the application is something I will cover in launching hybrid native apps, and also in the element locating mechanism. So how APM actually helps to like how Android SDKs actually help you to locate the elements, and how these elements are driven by APM framework is what I will explain. So another aspect of testing the mobile automation is you have to test the application's capability to respond to the touch actions, and which is nothing but the gesture actions. So for the same, there are different uh, methods and libraries that are available uh, from the APM framework, and using some examples I will also help you to understand the different actions which you should also be covering as a part of your test automation for the uh, application testing. Okay, so to start with the test automation, first of all, you have to understand what is the application you want to test, and how is that application going to respond to the different different commands that are sent from any test automation framework. So is it compatible for the test automation framework that we will be using. So currently in front of you, you will see there is a chart which is nothing but a comparison chart that helps you to the different uh, evaluate the different tools, or I would say different test automation frameworks, amongst which, according to the capability of your application or the scope of testing, you can choose any of these frameworks. So with this particular chart, if I go one by one, uh, like if you see, there are three frameworks which are listed as columns, like Appium, Salendroid, and Robotium. So I will be comparing these frameworks based on some of the points which will help you to evaluate why Appium is better than other two frameworks which are also open source in the market. So to start with the supported platform, Appium supports not only Android, but it also supports iOS as well as Firefox OS platforms. So any applications that you are trying to develop uh, on all these platforms can also be tested through the automation using Appium framework. However, with Salendroid and Robotium, you can test only Android, or you can write the test scripts for only Android applications. Next is the version support, where Appium only helps to drive. So as I mentioned, mostly the Android platform I will be guiding you with in this course, and that's why I just mentioned the comparison here of only Android version. So Appium is the framework which will help you to drive the test automation only on uh, only the versions from 4.2 and higher. So Salendroid is something which will support only 4.2 and lower versions of Android applications. And in case of Robotium, all the versions are supported. Now next is the source code dependency of AUT. This is nothing but application under test. Now the reason behind this as a evaluating factor is, if you see Robotium, it depends on the source code of the application. That is, in our case, if we compare this based on the application that is Android based, then you need you need a binaries of the application along with the APK to drive your test automation using Robotium. However, so is not the case with Salendroid and Appium. So here again, Appium wins the battle. Okay. Next is the need for the APK. So you need a APK file when you are using a Salendroid test automation framework, and Appium here also doesn't need a APK. Using the package names of the application itself, you can drive with the Appium. Okay, so here Appium not only depends on source code, no, it it doesn't depend on the source code, and neither it depends on the APK of the application. So that's why Appium is like it takes over the other two frameworks with respect to these 2 points. Next is the cross platforms, where Appium libraries have the Appium being a client server architecture. Its clients are being like these are the client libraries with which you can actually write the test automation scripts, and these scripts are independent of the uh, different programming languages which you are comfortable with. So So to mention here, Appium framework can be driven in any programming language scripts that you write. So C Sharp, Python, Java, Ruby, PHP, JavaScript. These are the different programming languages in which you can get the client library scripts. Along with that, if you compare the same with Selendroid and Robotium, they only support Java platforms. So again, the Appium wins the deal over the two different frameworks. And to conclude on this particular evaluating factor, Appium is preferred in most of the uh, test automation uh, test automation projects, because it being open source, you don't need to recompile any of the applications at runtime, and neither you have to depend on any source code or APK. And also the same code can be used to drive the iOS or Firefox OS, provided the different elements of the application and their attributes remain same across the different platforms. Okay, so in this slide, I will explain you the main concept about the test automation used on the mobile platforms, and how Appium with its client server architecture drives to make the test automation uh, in a very robust manner. So let me start from the left hand side. Okay, so first component is nothing but the test scripts which you write, the test automation scripts which you write, which in turn communicate with the Appium server, and Appium server communicates with the physical devices or the emulators. Okay, now to talk about test scripts that are developed either in Java, PHP, Ruby, or any Python or any other programming languages which are supported by Appium. They internally create a driver of the Appium, and they send their data in the form of JSON objects, which is based on the JSON wire protocol. So the commands are sent in the form of JSON objects to the Appium server. So this Appium server interprets uh, the commands, and it creates a session for itself. So always Appium server understands any commands coming from the test scripts, and it converts, and it first creates the session, and then it sends the commands to the physical device. So who is the first entity that will understand what to do with the commands coming from Appium is the bootstrap.jar. So this is by default running always uh, on the mobile devices. So like there is so once these commands come from the Appium server, now this initiates the socket server class. So socket server class creates internally. So this is nothing but the class which actually creates a session on the physical device or the emulator. And after creating a session, in the same session, Android command executor class initiates to process the command that has been coming from Appium. So once this command has been processed, it is sent to the UI automator class. So this is another class that actually works on the UI of the application under test. So that like different click actions or different gesture actions that need to be performed on the mobile devices, uh, are actually initiated with this class. And once it performs different actions, like suppose you say click on this, it processes the actions, and if that action went well or not, that particular uh, that particular uh, reply is sent back to the class which actually executed that particular action. And in turn, this this goes back uh, in the this goes back to the Appium server in the same REST API format. So once it closes this session there, uh, then this Appium server will interpret the output that has come in the form of REST calls, and it sends the output back to the scripts which we initiated. And so this WebDriver recognizes the responses that have come from the Appium server, and accordingly it processes for the output, and whatever assertions we have put to check if particular action has performed or not is something we can get with the help of the responses coming from the Appium server. So in this particular architecture diagram, you see that Appium server uh, is playing as an adapter between your scripts and the physical device, where it is intelligent enough to process the requests coming from the test scripts, sending it to the device in the required format, and getting the response from the device irrespective of how the actions go well on the device. And then it informs your scripts accordingly, uh, and which will make your scripts assert accordingly. So your scripts are okay. So now in this slide, I will explain what are the different prerequisite softwares as well as some of the hardware requirements. So if we go point by point, so real devices or virtual devices are the obvious prerequisites in any mobile uh, test automation suite, where if you see real devices can be Android or iOS, and virtual devices are some softwares that I will explain in this course. So to talk about how we can provision a virtual devices with a free version of Genymotion software. So this uh, so this ex- so this is a software that helps you to host a virtual device of Android platform. So in this course, I will explain you how to install and configure the free version of Genymotion tool uh, to help you to drive your test automation. So for this Genymotion tool, you need Oracle VirtualBox, and to drive your complete test automation using the Appium framework, you need Android SDKs, so that your gesture actions are different actions that Appium performs on the UI of the application are based on the libraries available from the SDK. Next is the PDNet software. This is a software you need to install on the real device, actually, which is needed for making a connection with the mobile test automation framework which has been set up at some machine. So this software is not needed to be installed on virtual devices, because your virtual devices are actually been configured by default when they are running with your mobile automation setup. So this part I will also be covering in my course as to how to configure your devices for your mobile automation. So next are the very obvious things that you might be comfortable to work with. So Eclipse for scripting and writing the automation scripts you need it. And in this course, I will cover the Python programming, where it won't be much hard to digest, because I will be covering the things as comparing to the Java, if you are comfortable with. And so most of the things will be similar, is what I assure you once we go through the course. Next is the Selenium. Why we need Selenium here is just to showcase how we can uh, how we can actually drive multiple Android devices using Selenium Grid. Here you don't have to be uh, aware of how Selenium works and all. Just few commands are there which you need to initiate, and that itself will make your test automation, that will be executable in a parallel way. So not too much worry about the architecture of Selenium here. Next is the Appium node server installer, which is the obvious thing for our framework to be making as a building block. So I will be explaining how to install the same and make it up and running. And so Appium language bindings are nothing but the libraries that have been written specific to any programming language. If you remember, in few slides back, in the evaluation chart, I mentioned few cross-platform languages where Appium supports. So you can have language bindings in all those different languages like C Sharp, Ruby, Python. If you want to communicate with the Appium server in any of these programming languages, then you have to have the language bindings of the respective programming language, which Appium provides from their websites. In our case, when we are writing the code of Appium scripts in Python, then I will be using language bindings of Python, right? Okay, so now just to give you a brief idea about how the complete infrastructure will be set up when we are ready to run any test automation on on the mobile platforms, and what all components will be playing their roles in the complete test automation architecture. So if you see this, this is actually the infrastructure which will be set up uh, and which are necessary for your test automation to be running from end to end. Let us go from left hand side. So Jenkins is nothing but a continuous integration tool which helps you to drive different uh, different uh, different architectures or something. As of now, for this course, you don't have to worry about Jenkins, because that comes as an advanced part in the test automation course. So for now, we will concentrate from thereafter. If you see a client, Appium client code is the next component. So this is nothing but the scripts that you have written, uh, the test automation scripts, which actually will be communicating with the Appium server. So Appium being a Node.js architecture, it understands this WebDriver scripts coming from from your code, and then it actually sends the command to the Android SDK, where the class ADB, this is Android Debugging Bridge. So ADB stands for Android Debugging Bridge, which actually helps us to drive the commands coming from the Appium node server to the respective devices. So now if you see, there are two uh, two two types of devices which I have mentioned here, which are actually linked with ADB. So ADB can communicate with virtual devices like Genymotion, and the Oracle VirtualBox which I have shown is nothing but in background a virtual machine is running, which actually is nothing but the emulator that is running. So let's not get confused with Genymotion and Oracle VirtualBox. It's the UI of Genymotion that runs the Oracle VirtualBox in the background is what I want to show here. Okay, so ADB redirects the commands from Appium node server not only to the virtual device, that is Genymotion, but it also can communicate with the real devices. And if you see on the real device, I have mentioned PDA net, that the software which you need to install so that you can have a connection with your test automation framework. So like if you see the flow from left side, the client libraries will initiate the commands. They will help, inform the node server, which will in turn be sent to the ADB. ADB will actually initiate uh, initiate the sessions, which will be communicating with the uh, emulator or the real devices. Okay. Okay, so going further, I will practically show the installation and configuration of the Appium server and how to host the Appium node server to communicate with the virtual devices or real devices. So, saying so, I will cover the steps to configure uh, and install the Genymotion, which is supposed to host the virtual devices. So I will cover that part, and along with that I will also show you the steps how to configure your real devices so that they can also be driven with the Appium server. This is how I will be driving my course going further. I hope you have got a brief introduction about Appium and how it can be used for the test automation as a part of the complete infrastructure. So each and every building block which you see as a part of the infrastructure diagram, we will be doing a step-by-step process uh, as in how we progress in the course. So I hope you understood the concepts in the day one session, and in the next session I will show you how to install and configure Appium, and also how to configure Genymotion as well as the real device for the test automation. Thank you for watching the first session